This is Ellis Aaron, and this is the story so far. So growing up, music was always a big part of my life. Records, vinyls, CDs, tapes, you name it. It was all over the house. And that really had a big impact on me as a child. You tend to, as a child, you explore, you go around, you see what's around the house, and in our case it was music. It was everywhere, and it's definitely one of the better things, the more positive things you can have around you when you're a child. When we were kids, we used to find CDs or vinyls, and because we've never heard them before, we just used to put them on the record player, or put the CD in the CD player and the hi-fi, and see who it was and what it sounded like, and that sort of discovery, that sort of inquisitiveness was a big part of who I am now in terms of my music, in terms of my influence as an artist. So I remember those times very well. It was a great time to learn and to develop, to find out about music, and to be better as a person. So my first encounter with music as an artist, or as a producer, was back when I was a teenager during secondary school. My dad had a beat machine which he would use to create loops and beats that he was working on at the time. And I remember when I first saw the beat machine, I was like, what does this do? How do you use it? That's where it started for me to actually start taking things seriously. I would pick up the drums, or I'd pick up the piano, but I wouldn't really stick to it. And obviously, life, things don't always go to plan. But yeah, the beat machine was where I really started to get a feel for music production and for sampling and looping, especially. I remember he allowed me to use the beat machine for the first time by myself, and when I started to understand how it goes and how you create sequences, that was really where my journey within music production started. And from there, it just created a sort of a wave in me, or unlocked my creative potential, I would say. So I actually started production as a teenager, finishing secondary school. So the last year of secondary school, I got a copy of a digital audio workstation, and it was FL Studio 8. FL Studio is obviously one of the ones that people, a lot of people use, but it isn't really considered as industry standard, which is interesting. I remember when I got the copy of it, I was excited because I'd always been around people who were making beats at school, and I always wanted to, give it a try myself and see what I could create. FL Studio was that starting point for me, as it is, I'm sure, for a lot of people. And pretty much most of the summer, I would just sit there making beats, pretty much. Back then, I was a big electronic music fan. Electronica was a big thing that I was into. You have obviously a lot of the genres that have sort of sprouted from electronica, grime, garage, and things like that. And I remember at the time I was quite into things like dubstep and dub and drum and bass. So those were the genres that I started with. Those are the genres that I started to produce first of all. It was really about me trying to experiment, and I felt like those genres were the genres which would allow me to do that. So back when I started, I was just making pure grime, dubstep, drum and bass, those sorts of genres. I wasn't really making, the sort of soul and R&B that I make nowadays. So as a child, I was very into percussion. It was, I used to beatbox. I used to make beats with anything, pieces of wood. Whenever I was listening to music, it was always the percussion I was listening to. And when I was a kid, I was practicing how to play the drums, and I wasn't really into playing any of the other instruments. I was purely focused on the drums. And then when I got hold of the production software, the thing that was the standout part for me in terms of producing was the beat. And that was the thing that I used to focus on a lot. I used to take the longest time making sure that the beat was right, making sure the snare was hitting the way I wanted, making sure the hi-hats were doing what I wanted. Going to university, it was a very difficult time for me because you're having to study and do coursework and do exams and assignments. You don't really have much time to produce music when you've got an assignment to write, or you've got proofreading to do, or references to find. I remember during second year, I met some people when I was at uni who were into music production and music and rap and everything like that. And we would exchange stories and ideas of how we started, what programs you use, how did you get into it. That really helped on my journey, it really helped me to sort of hone down in terms of who I was and my identity as a music producer. So it was really about trying to let those experiences provide me with a grounding and a basis that I could push on from. I was still very much at the time, still experimenting with production. I wasn't really set in terms of who I was and what I was doing, but I was just having fun with it. And I think that's really key, to have fun with what you're doing, because when you have fun with it, then there's no pressure, and you can surprise yourself. You can see what you can come up with, and it's like a blank canvas. You can find who you are and your identity, and that period of time for me was really what it was about. So my journey towards becoming an actual artist and actually releasing music, it was something that I was building up to. I think obviously when you're making music in your bedroom, it's private. You're just getting on with it. You're doing what you need to do, and you don't really think about releasing anything. You're just doing it for you. You're just doing it as a hobby, or to make yourself happy. But then there comes a certain time and a certain stage where you have to think, okay, I should really be making the most of this. If I've spent all this time, all my free time mostly making music and learning how to produce music, why don't I try and make something of it and try and see where it could take me? I'm sure it's the same for a lot of producers. You have a library of music production and a library of tracks and beats that you've made, some of them unfinished, but they're just sitting there, and it's really up to you what you do with them. At the time, I was experimenting with rap and with hip hop especially, and lyricism and spoken word and poetry, and it becomes more than just a hobby after a while. I think the pivotal moment for me was when I was working on a demo of Now's the Time, and no one had heard it. No one had heard my recording over it. And at that time, as I said, I was experimenting with vocals and singing and rapping, but I didn't really take it seriously. I didn't really think that what I was doing was anything special or anything that anyone would necessarily want to listen to. So it was just a bit of fun and something that I was doing just to pass the time and to enjoy while I was doing it and while I was making the music. But I actually played a demo of the track to my dad, and my dad kind of said to me, why are you sort of holding on to this? This is good, and you should consider finishing it and releasing it and see what happens, see where it goes. That was really the start of it. I played it to someone for the first time as a bedroom producer, as a bedroom artist, and then it was from that moment when I decided, okay, look, I need to actually see where this goes. I might actually have a shot here. And of course, you never really know what feedback you're going to get until you actually release stuff. But yeah, it was that crust of feedback that I needed to really push on and use it to actually release stuff. And yeah, from there, I finished the track. I mixed it down many times. And then that led to me working on Focus, which was obviously my first EP. It was the start of me as an artist. It was the start of me, releasing music to the public. And I didn't know what the feedback was going to be. I didn't know how it was going to be received. But I was completely surprised when you start hearing what people have to say, and the feedback I got was monumental and was really humbling for me. premise of the EP was really how I started as a producer. You know, I started in my bedroom, I got hold of some software, and then you move on from there. All 3 tracks, that was exactly how they were all created. Now's the Time, the revelation, if you will, or the track which explained where I was at that time. You know, now's the time for me to actually go for this. I knew that I had something, I knew that I had ability to make music, so why not release it and allow other people to listen to it. Can't Wait to See the Sun was another track that was written a few years before, so it was a song that I wanted to include on the project because I felt it would fit with Now's the Time and with the idea behind the project and the EP. As I say a lot, some of the tracks that I write, they're written years in advance. I don't know why that happens, but I do it just because when the idea comes up, you just jot it down and then you complete the song when you're ready, when you have the rest of the song in your head. So get ready, I can't explain it, but it's taking over me. I tried to use the home part because it was a house track, so that was easy for me to include. But Soul is Home was really just, again, an echo of Now's the Time, you know, me finding finally what I wanted to do with my life. Going through uni and school, not really knowing what I wanted to do, but Soul is Home being that moment where I can say, yeah, this is what I want to do, this is what my passion is. It was really the song which I wanted people to understand, you know, that was where I was coming from. That was where I was on that journey of discovery, trying to see what it is I wanted to do with my life, and meeting or finding that place where, you know, your spirit is happy, your spirit is content. And with me, my spirit was or is content within music. Music is the home, so Soul is Home, that was the idea behind that track. So Now's the Time was the first track that I wrote. I think I wrote that one in, the EP was released in 2017. I think I wrote Now's the Time in 2014, I think. So quite a few years before. Can't Wait to See the Sun was a song that I wrote in 2016. It was that sort of soulful, hip-hoppy vibe, which would show my production ability. And at the time, I was actually changing genres. I went from the sort of dubstep and the grime to more of the soul and more of the R&B. So that sort of slowed down style, that slowed down vibe was really what I wanted to bring through with Can't Wait to See the Sun. And I was happy with the way it came out. To a certain extent, you know, I'm a perfectionist, so I wasn't completely happy, but I was happy enough. And then Soul is Home was the track that I wrote after the other two. I was very into house music, and I still am into house music. There are different types of house, but house generally is very uplifting. It's got a beat to it, it's got a pace, and that is something that I wanted to bring to the project. You know, I've got this soulful funk track in Now's the Time. I've got this sort of hip-hop neo-soul in Can't Wait to See the Sun. So I thought, let me try and change it up again and bring in a more up-tempo track in Soul is Home. Yeah, I mean, like I said, the feedback that I got from it being played in the UK to being played in America and South America, Asia, South Africa, like it went around, and I didn't expect that. You know, I didn't expect to have people playing my music. I dropped it straight on Bandcamp, and Bandcamp obviously is a place of discovery for artists, for indie artists. So I didn't expect to have that feedback at all. And then when it did come through, or when I was getting the messages, you know, I was blown away. What do you do as a newcomer? You know, you just have to take it and cherish it and enjoy and bask in it. The follow-up track I released was Me and You, which was an R&B track. That day you walk through the door. This was another track which I produced many years before I released it. This was one of those tracks that I created but wasn't sure I was ever going to release. One day I was going through that library of songs that I have on my computer, or had on my computer at the time, and I found it and I thought, oh, what about if I finish this one and see how this one goes? And this was also a track that I got good feedback on. It's one of my favorites of the tracks that I've made. So yeah, it was that R&B track of yesteryear, that R&B track with the vibes from, you know, the past, but with that sort of new school feel at the same time. You walk around like nothing bothers you. And then I also dropped a remix to that, very different from the original, of course, but it was a song that I felt warranted a remix because I wanted to bring a different feel and different vibe to it. So the remix itself had a little bit more of a Latin feel, a little bit more of a percussive element to it, whereas the original was a bit more, you know, synthesized and produced. Echoes was an EP that I was working on from, I'd say, 2018 to 2019. But some of the songs, again, I created them from 2016, 2015. And some of the songs that were due to go on the EP, I decided not to put on and switch them with other tracks. Just trying to make sure that all the songs are going in the same direction. When I release projects, when I release EPs, I like to make sure that there's a theme and make sure that the songs are all pulling together in the same place and that they are all reflecting the theme that I'm trying to display. I was planning to make it a project that would reflect the first project that I released. So Focus was obviously where I started. Echoes was me sort of going back to Focus in some way, but making it different and making it reflect where I was at that time. You know, I wasn't the newcomer anymore. Still learning, still developing, being older, me being in a different space, me being in a different place as a person. So Echoes was that EP, that was that opportunity for me to show a different side of me, to still create quality music, but to bring a different feel, a different vibe. The focus of the present, Focus being the first EP, but Echoes being the current time focus. The tracks on Echoes were tracks that I really wanted to be within the same genre or the same field, unlike the first EP, which was, you know, there was house, there was soul, there was sort of hip hop and that sort of vibe. For Echoes, I wanted it to stay within soul and neo soul. And the reason why is because I just felt like the idea behind the EP itself, it would be right for what I was trying to bring to the table. Now, the tracks themselves, in terms of writing them and producing them, I tend to produce lots of instrumentals. You know, whenever you get the idea, you just switch on the computer and work on some music. But I tend to usually either write lyrics first or produce the song first. And all of these tracks, the track was produced first. In terms of workflow, I tend to find it easier to do it that way, just simply because when the track is done, you just have to work out, you know, the lyrics themselves and then, you know, harmonies and melodies. And it's really easy to do that that way around, I find. So with Echoes, that was one thing. There was a uniformity already in terms of all the tracks were created in the same sort of order. The first track being Joy. It's not often enough that I feel mostly happy. That track was just an explanation of finding, you know, happiness when you are in that sort of period of doubt and that unsettling period. That moment when you find that thing that you can hold on to, which brings you joy, which makes you happy. That was really where that song was going. That was really the idea I had for that track. And as I put in a little booklet of the EP, I actually made several versions of that track, which I tend to do a lot. You know, I tend to just produce the track and then maybe a few years later be like, yeah, that's not really working, so let me do another version. And because it was the first track, again, I wanted it to mirror Now's the Time on the first EP. You know, I wanted it to be a similar style or similar acoustic feel. So with the drum kit, with the keys, with the vibes, with the bass guitar, with the chords, with that sort of style, I wanted it to mirror the first track on the first project that I released. And yeah, it was just really about being happy, really finding that thing that you can hold on to put that smile on your face in those tough times. Track 2, What Happened to Us. I knew probably before the project was going to be released that would be the track that people would like, and as it turned out to be, it was the case. What Happened to Us was written from that place of a relationship which is kind of failing or going downhill. Most of the tracks I write, they're from personal experience, so it's not really hard for me to take an experience and put it into song. So What Happened to Us was really quite straightforward for me to write. Again, the track was already made, so it was just creating a story to go with the music. And it was a track that, again, it was probably the most recent track in terms of the EP. That was the track I wrote last. So again, it was still fresh in the mind. It was still there, ready for me to place within the project. Yeah, it's your typical R&B track with a soulful feel to it. So I just can't believe what's happened to us. Last on the project was More Than Enough. More Than Enough, again, another track which I made another version of, and there is another version somewhere. I wanted this song to reflect where I was as a person at the time. I chose the theme of echoes, or the name Echoes, because I was trying to get across the feeling that in life you go through certain experiences and you come across the same sort of learnings or the same sort of messages. And that was really the thought process behind the project. I wanted these tracks to illustrate that sort of theme, but to be from different periods of my life. So obviously What Happened to Us being when I was in the relationship, or in that sort of relationship phase, Joy being just, sort of on a personal phase, and More Than Enough being a bit more spiritual. You probably hear on the track, it's more of a spiritual song. It's more of a track which has a bit more of a deeper meaning than the other two. I left it open to interpretation. People can, take from it what they will. That song was written from a very remorseful place, a very deep place. Again, as a musician, a percussionist, or from a percussionist background, for this track, as I did with the remix for Me and You, I wanted to bring that acoustic feel back. So it was live conga. It was that live percussion, clicks, claps, tambourine, chords, bass. Again, I really wanted to bring through the acoustic feel, that chilled, laid-back track. With all these songs, you want to try and make music that people can listen to at different stages. Whether it's, you're listening to the song in the car when you're on a journey, or when you're listening to it at home and you just want to chill out. I just really wanted to make sure that there was a song on there for different types of settings, different types of moods. I was happy with the way it turned out. It was a project that, again, I got great feedback from, and a project which I'm a perfectionist, can't help that, but I was happy with generally in terms of the finished project. All the tracks that I've released, all the tracks that I've been working on, they all reflect me. They all reflect how I started as a producer, how I started as a musician. I've had that acoustic background, I've had that acoustic genesis, if you will, within music, but me as an artist, I started as a producer. I started making music with a computer. So all the tracks that I've released, all the tracks that I've been working on, they all reflect that genesis. They all reflect that beginning. They all reflect how I started. I like to change it up. I like to release this sort of genre this time, and then this sort of genre this time, or the next time. And yeah, just keep it fresh, change it up. I'm all about the different genres that I grew up around. And I try to make sure that comes out in the releases that I end up releasing.